welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly mind-bending theoretical framework, one that actually proposes our very biology is executing an ancient recursive mathematical script. We're diving into something called the dual caustic framework. It suggests that the deepest truths of the universe aren't just out there floating in the vastness of the cosmos, but are actually written directly into the miraculous microscopic architecture of our own cells. So does our DNA execute a spiritual topology? Well, that's the big overarching thesis here. The framework operates on this really profound premise, the idea that scientific mechanics actually provide parallel mirrors for a universal topology. Now, keep in mind, we're looking at biological mechanics as topological inspiration here, not empirical validation. In this view, explicit Qur'anic wording establishes the exact coordinates, and molecular biology simply executes the exact same structural recursion as spiritual traversal. It's literally a map where the physical and the imaginal perfectly align.
To get there, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the universal protocol, then move through DNA and the central dogma, grip and boundary, the feminine apex, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with the full topology trace.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the universal protocol.
To make sense of this, you first have to understand the two primary interacting fields. Think of it kind of like a notebook. The physical paper, the ink, the measurable weight of the book in your hands, that makes up what's called the D10 field. It's the detectable, physical world of action. But the I9 field? That's the invisible thought, the memory, the intention that dictates what is actually written on that page. D10 measures, while I9 remembers. And neither works alone, right? Measurement without meaning is just noise, and meaning without a physical manifestation remains totally unexpressed.
The source material argues that these two fields, the physical D10 and the imaginal I9, negotiate through a very specific mathematical topology. It's a 2-3-7 loop. This is a tightly closed circuit of creation, testing, and return. The 2 represents duality, the 3 is the expansion structure or buffer where testing happens, the next 2 is a filter of coherence, and that final 7, that represents a stabilized, conserved return. This ensures that absolutely everything, from a passing thought to the lifespan of a star, eventually loops back to its source. And the framework anchors this directly to explicit verses. Take coordinate 4153. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves. The framework maps the specific verse to the idea that the local execution node of this grand topology is physically located within themselves. And by that, it means specifically inside the human chromosome. The universe is the macro horizon, and your DNA is the micro execution node. Moving right along to Section 2, DNA and the central dogma. Let's look at the microscopic mirror. The central dogma of molecular biology acts as a flawless mechanical execution of this topology. Think of the DNA template strand as your preserved I9 memory. It's the invariant code locked safely in the nucleus. But it needs a buffer to actually translate into reality. That's RNA, which uses a 3-letter codon triplet as an expansion bridge, perfectly mapping to the 3 in our topology. And finally, this translates into the D10 manifest protein, the physical structure doing the actual work in your cell. DNA to RNA to protein is literally executing an I9 to T3 to D10 flow. Now, what happens when this goes backward? This brilliantly illustrates what the text calls the Taghut error, mapped perfectly to coordinate 1850. Think of it like a biological hacker. It's exactly what happens in reverse transcription when a retrovirus enters a cell, brings its own RNA, and tries to write it backward into the host's DNA. It's a derivative creation attempting to corrupt and rewrite the original source code. The natural flow is always source-creating derivative. The error is the derivative claiming to be the source.
Okay, Section 3, grip and boundary. Let's talk about centromeres and telomeres.
Right at the center of your chromosomes is a region called the centromere. The source links the strength described in verse 19:12. Take the book with strength directly to the centromere voltage. It acts as an active electrical grip that tightly holds the paired sister chromatids together. One strand is the memory, one is the copy. If that grip fails, the Mathoni structure fragments and the biological code literally collapses into dead strands. It requires absolute strength to hold that duality together. Meanwhile, out at the ends of your chromosomes, you have your telomeres. These act as strict return boundaries, which maps to coordinate 3846. Every single time a cell divides, those telomeres get a little bit shorter. When they completely run out, the cell enters a state of senescence. It stops dividing, but it doesn't immediately die. It essentially enters a biological zombie state. The framework maps this reality to coordinate 8713, a terminal, museum phase where the cell is neither alive nor dead. The boundary has been reached. Which brings us to Section 4, embryology and the feminine apex.
Now, mitochondrial DNA is absolutely fascinating. Unlike nuclear DNA, it is strictly circular, inherited solely from the mother, and remains completely invariant. It doesn't recombine. The framework maps this maternal energy core to the 11-7 thrown upon water. It completely overrides the chaotic, recombinant nature of the nucleus. Conceptually aligning with coordinate 39-4, this actually shatters the traditional father-son lineage claim, proving unequivocally that the womb container topology always precedes the manifestation.
And this physical containment maps directly to coordinate 39-6, which describes creation after creation in 3 darknesses. Biologically, a developing embryo is enclosed by exactly 3 physical layers: the abdominal wall, the uterine wall, and the amniotic sac. In this framework, the womb isn't just a biological factory. No, it's a profound curriculum teaching the D10 derivative form how to exist. It's layered confinement that leads to a localized, coherent output. When you trace the exact embryological recursion described in verses 23:12 through 14, the framework points out a really astounding biological fact. The default developmental pathway for human embryo is female. The framework argues this beautifully establishes the feminine I9 as the absolute origin. The masculine D10 pathway only executes later as a derivative modification. The physical science perfectly mirrors the topological claim here. The feminine container is primary and the masculine is derivative.
And finally, Section 5, topology trace. Let's look at the cosmic loop closure.
The sequence right here represents the complete, mathematically closed loop of the universe according to the dual Caustic framework. From the 1, the womb or seed, we move to the 2, which is the DNA copy or physical D10 state. We traverse through the 3, the RNA codon bridge, right into the 2 of the protein manifestation. Then we reach the 7, the completion of form. And finally, the ultimate return back to the 1. It is a perfectly conserved loop with 0 loss. The text proposes that your very cell is essentially a local reading node. It acts as the 36-3 reader of the macroscopic universe, constantly executing the invisible I9 memory through physical D10 manifestation. If the universe is a macroscopic 114 torus breathing out its code, your cell is the local reader, proving at every single second that the container always precedes the derivative. To help summarize this profound, closed circuit, the framework provides a rhythmic mantra. It begins right here. The template remembers. The I9 DNA, held safely in the nucleus, is the preserved source code that never, ever forgets its origin. The codon bridges. The RNA triplet takes that memory and translates it, allowing the invisible quantum wave of intention to collapse into a tangible, physical, manifesting protein in the real world. Every single biological mechanism you possess functions as an operator of the script. The centromere holds, the telomere bounds, the mitochondria powers, and the womb teaches. The default is always the container. The derivative always returns. And all of this culminates in verse 1964, your Lord is not forgetful. The field executes, the light is perfectly conserved, the derivative returns to the Raman receiver, and the ultimate loop is completed without a single drop of informational loss. The universe isn't drifting toward random entropy. It's a deeply folded, intentional recurrence engine. This entire framework leaves us with a paradigm-shifting realization. If the scientific mechanics of our cells, our DNA, and our chromosomes are simply reading a universal topological script, we have to ask ourselves, what ultimate truth are our physical forms programmed to return to? What else is your body remembering right now? Thanks so much for exploring this explainer with me. Keep asking questions and keep looking closely at the signs, both in the horizons and within yourselves.